There are some stories that are so powerful, they just refuse to die. And for over 150 years, there's a story that's been told in Ireland. It's a tale of incredible generosity from a far-off land and of bitter resentment for a ruler much closer to home. It's a story that pits a compassionate sultan against a cold-hearted queen, right in the middle of one of the darkest chapters in history. So the legend goes something like this. As the Great Famine is devastating Ireland, Queen Victoria, the head of the mightiest empire on earth, supposedly offers a measly £5. Just £5. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, the Ottoman Sultan, Abdulmajid I, hears about what's happening and he wants to send a massive £10,000. But he's supposedly stopped by British diplomats.
I mean, it is such a dramatic tale, right? You've got your clear hero, your clear villain, and it's a story that has absolutely fueled Irish identity and anger for generations. But today, we're going to be historical detectives. We're going to peel back all those layers of folklore and see what's really going on underneath.
So first things first, let's tackle the famine queen herself, Queen Victoria. Is there any truth to the story that she only gave a pathetic £5? Well, the historical records are actually pretty clear on this one. Turns out, in 1847, Victoria donated £2,000. Now, to put that in perspective, in today's money, we're talking about more than $300,000. This made her the single largest private donor to the relief effort. So yeah, the whole £5 story, it's a myth. Case closed. Or is it?
Because, of course, the story isn't quite that simple. Historians found a private note from the secretary of the Relief Association, and it reveals that the Queen's first offer was only £1,000. And this guy, Stephen Spring Rice, he was so insulted he basically went behind her back and complained that it just wasn't enough from the Queen, and only then did they double the amount.
So, you might be asking, how in the world did we get from £2,000 to just 5? Well, this is how a myth is born. For decades after the famine, nobody mentioned a £5 donation. The name Famine Queen was actually invented 40 years later by Irish nationalists. And then, in 1896, Victoria gave £5 to a victim of a completely separate, much smaller disaster. And over time, people's memories just got fuzzy. The two events got mashed together in the popular imagination, and suddenly you have a powerful and totally misleading story. Okay, so the Queen's story is way more complicated than the legend lets on. Now let's flip the coin and look at the hero of our story, the Ottoman Sultan Abdulmajid I. All right, so the official records show the Sultan donated £1,000, and you've got to understand that was a huge amount of money back then. It was a really incredible act of charity, especially when you consider that the Ottoman Empire had zero political ties to Ireland and was actually dealing with its own money problems at the time. But here's where the legend and reality start to collide. This journal entry from 1853 claims the Sultan's personal doctor, who was actually an Irishman, told him about the famine. And he really did want to send that £10,000, but the British ambassador apparently stepped in and said, "Whoa, hold on. It would be awkward if you gave more than our own queen." And get this wasn't just some rumor that popped up decades later. People were writing about this intended £10,000 donation in books just a few years after the famine. That gives a lot of weight to the idea that the Sultan's amazing generosity was in fact squashed by British officials to avoid embarrassment. So, the Sultan dials back his public donation to £1,000 to keep the peace. But the legend says he wasn't done. He then secretly sent ships loaded with food to Ireland. So the question is, could that part of this incredible story actually be true? This, for me, is where the story gets really fun. To find the answer, we have to stop looking in official government files and start digging through old local newspapers and listening to the stories passed down in a small Irish town. Okay, so in the port town of Drogheda, the story of the Turkish ships isn't just a legend, it's practically fact. They even have a plaque to commemorate it. Now, you might hear a popular myth that the city adopted the star and crescent for its coat of arms as a thank you, but that's not true. That symbol is way older. But that core belief, the absolute certainty that the ships came, that has never faded. And then, you're not going to believe this, local historians found it. The proof, hidden away in the shipping news of the local paper from May 1847. Look at this. It lists two ships, the Porcupine and the Anne. And where did they come from? Salonika, which was the name for Thessaloniki, a major port in the Ottoman Empire. It was true. The ships from the Sultan's empire really did arrive. But there's always a but, isn't there? There's a catch. The newspaper says the cargo was consigned to local merchants. That usually means it was a business deal, not charity. So we're left with this huge question. Was this a secret aid mission paid for by the Sultan, with the merchants just being a cover? Or was it all just a remarkable coincidence of regular trade? The paper trail, it just goes cold. And that ambiguity, that mystery, might just be what leads us to the most important question of all. Why? Why has this story, especially the part about the Sultan's aid, meant so much to the Irish people for over 150 years? Why did they need this story to be true? Well, the answer really lies in the absolute failure of British policy at the time. The government in London was obsessed with this idea of laissez-faire, basically a hands-off approach. They believed the free market would just sort everything out. The man in charge of relief, Charles Trevelyan, is on record saying he saw the famine as an act of God meant to solve overpopulation. Just an unbelievably callous view. And this is the image that was burned into the Irish memory forever. The idea that while people were starving to death, food, plenty of food, was being shipped out of Ireland for profit. The nationalist John Mitchell summed up this feeling of complete betrayal with this absolutely haunting line about relief ships coming in, passing cargo ships going out. So, into that vacuum of compassion, into that deep despair, the story of the Sultan's aid became a lifeline. It created a hero. It showed that someone, somewhere in the world, actually cared when their own rulers didn't seem to. It was a story of hope, a story of human solidarity that was the complete opposite of the cold official indifference they saw every single day. So where does that leave us? The legend, as it's told, isn't 100% historically accurate. But it points to a much deeper truth about what it felt like to live through the famine. It speaks to a desperate need for kindness in a time of incredible cruelty. And it honors a real, documented act of compassion from Sultan Abdul-Majid. So I guess the final question is, what really matters more? The precise historical facts, or the meaning and hope that a nation finds in a story that it simply refuses to let go of?